I've been following the grilling of Tony Blair in Britain that's taking place right now concerning the justification and the decisions that led up to the decision to go to a war with Iraq, the war that eventually resulted in the present situation in Iraq. Mr. Blair spins a pretty darn good yarn. He can be pretty convincing, and I think that there's a lot of anti-war types out there that are probably get very angry when they hear him talk. Because he is able to field a lot of the questions and deal with a lot of the objections that people would have to his decisions and the decisions that those around him made leading up to the war. I am sort of, as I've mentioned in previous videos, I'm something of a pacifist. I'm not a hard pacifist, by the way, but it does seem to me that war is pretty much an abomination to be avoided. But so are a lot of other things in life that are more or less going to stay with us, or at least it's unrealistic to think that we can remove them from the picture. I'm also, as an aside, fascinated by military history. I read about it all the time. But war is, I think, a very interesting phenomenon. A terrible phenomenon. I suppose it's one of those things that just because it tends to overwhelm the imagination and frighten and shock us, that we are kind of interested in it in the same way as we're interested by the evil people in the Lord of the Rings or in science fiction or in general. We're fascinated by that which frightens and disgusts and repels us. I'm certainly fascinated by it. Now, it's still a dreadful thing to have to live through. I've never lived through a war. I have some military training and some military experience, but I've never been in a war zone. I don't know what it's like to actually be there when someone might shoot me. I don't know what it's like to kill somebody. I don't know what it's like to spend a number of years in a situation where I may have to kill or be killed. I don't know what that does to individuals. I can try to understand it, but it's not such an easily defined thing or an easily understood thing. Nor have I lived as a civilian through a war, a real war. Now, this is probably a dreadful thing to say if you're an Iraqi or a member of an American military family, but what's going on in Iraq right now is not, in the grand scheme of things, that big of a war. It must seem awfully big to the soldiers that are there or the Iraqis that are there, but it's more or less an insurgency / counterinsurgency right now. That too, I suppose, is a form of warfare. But when I speak of war, generally I'm talking about things like the Second World War or the Vietnam War, when there was overt shooting war. And these things actually, I think, are not so cut and dried as we might think that they are. Because there's the obvious cases where, well, even a pacifist would have a hard time justifying his position when it comes to things like dealing with Adolf Hitler or the Taliban, 9/11. I understand that, and I don't judge people that were pacifists at that time, but it did tend to make me, as someone who thinks of themselves as a pacifist, or I remember 9/11 did sort of make me think, okay, this time this has gone too far and I think something has to be done. Now, it's possible I was being manipulated. It's also possible that that things were actually happening the way that we believed that they were happening. I'm just saying my own personal experience. Okay, there's the other issue is the Gulf War and the first Gulf War. Because of my past military experience, I got a letter from the National Defense Headquarters in Canada, stating when the build-up to the first Gulf War was taking place, where I was to report my whereabouts. Now, to anyone who remembers that period, it did look like we were building up to a huge war, something along the lines of maybe the Second World War. Maybe not quite so bad, but it was going to be a big war. Well, it didn't turn out that way. It was more like a human being swatting a fly. But it looked as though it was going to be a big war, and I was not going to have any part of it. I might have done something about it if Saddam Hussein had sailed into, as I always say, Halifax Harbor in eastern Canada. But I wasn't going to go over there to deal with to defend a bunch of spoiled Arabs. And again, I don't mean Arabs are bad, not at all, but I mean that kind of stereotypical spoiled Gulf Arab that is really of no use to anyone. That's the way I saw it then, so I just didn't answer. As it turned out, it was a false alarm. I wasn't even remotely likely to get sent over there. But still, it did make me think. And even then, as a pacifist, I sort of said, no, this one here I ain't doing. But there are circumstances when, okay, we weigh the pros and cons and we say, okay, well, there's no way out of this situation. We've got to use force. Now what do we do? And that's a tough one. That's a tough one. At the end of the day, sometimes society has to rely upon coercion. I don't really know if we've quite found the solution to misbehaving people, or I suppose misbehaving regimes, either of the obvious North Korean sort, who seem to deliberately ramp up the tension in order to survive, or the misbehaving regime like, well, dare I wade into this one, George W. Bush. What do you do when this sort of thing happens? Okay, well, I suppose the only thing that one can do in a situation like that is sort of make one's own moral choices and lay one's chips on the side that one wishes to take in that situation. And I think that a lot of people now are sort of torn about the Iraq War right now, and it seems to have divided the world into two pro and con camps. But to get back to Tony Blair, I disagree with what he's saying. I think that it kind of was, at the very best, to put the most positive spin on it, a mistake. I remember when the invasion took place, I remember my overall feel was, oh, I hope you know what you're doing. It wasn't like, oh, you SOBs, how dare you do this? It's just, I don't know if this is going to have the desired results. And in that way, I suppose I was opposed to it. I also felt for the people that were going to get caught up in it, although I didn't expect it to last as long as it did. So it's kind of a gray area, this business of war. What do we do? There's no other way to look at war besides as an abomination, as a dreadful thing. Do you know what assault rifles are meant to do? What hand grenades are designed to do? Artillery pieces, what they're supposed to actually do. They're there for no other reason than to destroy human bodies in horrible ways. That's what these things are for. And war is nothing more than the use of these things on a massive scale. So I wonder if we're likely to ever remove it from the picture. I think that we should move in that general direction, but I think at present I don't think that we're likely to actually see a war-free world in the near future. I tend to take, my views of war have been greatly influenced by a Canadian author by the name of Gwynne Dyer, who's written extensively on it for the last 30 years. But lately, Neil Ferguson, the fellow who wrote and narrated The War of the World, has fascinated me as well. He says war, and in the Second World War in particular, was not a struggle between good and evil, because the Allies did a lot of evil things. The area bombing of German cities was, in his view of things, if not out-and-out genocide, very close to it. And the atom bomb and the demonization of, in particular, the Japanese, they're labeling as subhumans, wasn't exactly a nice thing. He said war is not a struggle between good and evil. It's a struggle between evil and lesser evil. Thank you.